Today's conversation explores how real estate investors can move beyond small deals.
We will continue to work through the people until we get to the 1% that we want to work with. Like, it's worth going through 10 different people to get to the one that is really amazing.
And step into larger opportunities using private money, creative financing, and strategic partnerships without adding more complexity or workload to an already full plate. Hello. Welcome to another episode of The Freedom Blueprint. I am Adrienne Green, and today I have with me my friend and investor, Julie Cooper. Thanks for joining me, Julie.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome. It's good to see you.
Thank you. And here on the podcast, we help real estate and entrepreneurs break free of the grind and really live the lives that they got into real estate for in the first place. And so I know you've got a great story about that, Julie, and about the freedom that it's giving you that we'll get to at the end. And to start off, can you just give us a quick snapshot of what your real estate investing looks like right now?
Yeah, I'm super excited. I retired from education 2 weeks ago. And so this is, full-time real estate investing now. So I do real estate investing with my siblings, my sister and my brother. We are full into that together. So between all of us, we have 9 doors right now, and we are working on some other ones as well. And they're a mix of a short-term rental, long-term rental, mid-term rental. We do have duplex in the mix, so there's multifamily in there. And we've done a ton of renovation with them. And so even though they haven't been fix and flips per se, which we have done one of those, but they've been fix and hold. So we've done a lot of renovation through those.
Perfect. That was a great summary. Thank you. And I love how you shared first how you're creating freedom through your real estate investing already. Like, I'm so excited for you in that transition.
Yeah, thank you. I know you're an inspiration. I'm like, one of these days I'll be traveling as well.
Well, and you do travel a lot, girl.
Did you see my thing about last week or in March? Like, I was everywhere in March. It was crazy. It was fun. I loved it. But I'm like, I need to be home for a couple weeks.
Right. Yes. And that is a fun thing that you get to say and be like, I need to balance time home versus traveling when you're a real estate investor that you can't always say as like a W-2 employee.
Right. So much more freedom.
Yes. And I also love that you do this with your siblings. You know, we get a lot of people in the real estate entrepreneur space, like husband-wife teams, which are a whole thing to talk about well. And yet we also have this sibling dynamic that you've got going on, which is less common and amazing. It's amazing that you get to work with your siblings.
So we live in 2 different states. So 2 of us live in Alabama and 2 of us live in Las Vegas. One of my sisters, she's a principal, so she's busy and doesn't have as much involvement with it, but it's drawn us so much closer together as adults. And so it's been awesome.
I love that. I have sometimes shared when I'm on other people's podcasts about how one of the greatest things I love about our travel lifestyle is getting to spend so much time together as a family. And I really want like my 3 kids to be close. I want them to be the kind of siblings who would go invest together or businesses together in the future. And so it's nice to see that you and your siblings have done that.
Yes, we attribute that to our mom. I mean, she has raised us so that we all respect each other. And our age differences are quite a bit. Like, we have a big age difference. And so that's actually benefited the connection that we've had through real estate.
I love it. Okay, so let's talk about, you highlighted how you've done a lot of value add, and that was something that I had on the list. I wanted to talk about your like BRRRR investing, your value add investing. Let's talk about the financing piece of that. You've done some seller financing. I think you've done some bank stuff. You know, we'll talk about the private money piece where we worked together. How do you decide which strategy that you're going to use for a specific deal?
That is a very good question, and it depends on the deal. So I live in Las Vegas, but our investments are in Alabama and Costa Rica. And so depending on where it is and how much the investment is, then that determines the financing. So we've bought anything, we've just purchased, straight up purchased a house for $27,000, I think is what it was, $25,000, $27,000 in Alabama. So that was just a straight purchase. And then we financed the renovation ourselves on that one. Then we've also done seller financing. We have 3 properties that are seller financed. And that is by far the easiest and best way to go if it works out on both sides as far as the paperwork and all that goes. And so that one is determined by really the situation in the seller. I always ask that question because it is such a benefit to the seller. as well. And so if that will work out, then we go that direction. And then if that doesn't work out, then we look at other lending. So throughout the last few years, I've really made some connections with private money lenders because, you and I are working together on one as well. Last year, just with the different projects and things, I raised over $850,000 for our projects through that. Now, we still owe a lot of that money,
Right.
but that is really bringing that in with private money lenders so that it's attached to the projects and we're able to be more effective with our money, with our own money.
What I would love to do is to dive into the private lending piece because that's how we've worked together. And I think you have been really great at finding private lenders and you leveraging that money. Now, private money is not going to be like the cheapest money, right? It's going to be more expensive than a conventional, DSCR loan or something like that. So for our listeners who are investors and they aren't using private money like yet, can you explain how using private money is a win for you, even though it's a more expensive loan than some other things?
Yeah, great question because it is shell shock. Sometimes when you're looking at the interest rate, where it's like, you grow up thinking of interest rates and you're going to buy a regular house and you think, oh, it needs to be the same interest rate as if I was buying my own home. That's not true when it comes to private money lending and doing projects. Because of the time that's associated with the project, it makes sense most of the time to go ahead and pay the higher interest rate because you're using it for such a short amount of time. Of course, it
Right.
always goes back to the numbers. It always goes back to making sure you have enough margin in your deal to be able to pay the higher interest rate for that short amount of time. But really, when you look at it, if you're only borrowing the money for 6 months or 8 months or even 12 months sometimes, it still makes sense to pay the higher interest rate because of the ease of money. So when you're going through a traditional loan, the amount of paperwork is like giving your
Right.
firstborn child. And usually with private money and hard money, it's a more direct, here's what you need. It's attached to the project and you're done. Like you sign the paperwork. There's some background, of course. There's some processes that you have to go through, but it's a much easier process.
Right. And it allows you to do more deals, right? So even if you're paying, it was so funny because we did have this borrower once who was pushing back a lot on the interest rate for a loan. The whole reason she was because she had been quoted by some other lender a different, rate and term, but then of course they couldn't actually lend on the property. So she was trying to get that same term from us who we could actually lend on the property. You'll appreciate this, Julie. It's because it was rural. And as you know, most lenders really don't like rural. And
Yep.
it was like she was making such a big deal about it. And we did the calculation. I'm like, the difference in interest rate is $300.
Yeah.
$300
Yeah.
over the entire length of the loan. I hope $300 isn't making or breaking your deal because
Any
if it
deal.
is, those margins are too thin, right?
And it is. It's crazy when you look at the numbers that way. It's not that big of a difference whenever you're looking at it. And especially the way you guys do it is awesome because you're able to put the interest rate, like we're not paying the full interest rate on the whole loan the whole time. So we're paying on how much we're taking as we're taking it.
Right.
So, for example, without giving actual numbers, like just as an example, like if you're borrowing 100,000, but you only need 20,000 for a month, and then you're doing the next renovations and you need another 20,000 for a month, that interest rate is only being charged on that 20 and then on that 20. Like it adds
Right.
up as it goes. But some loans, you're paying the full amount
Yes.
for the
whole
whole
time.
time that you have the loan.
Right. Yeah.
So-
And that's important to see those differences because some people will do things, we got into lending as investors and people in the real estate space ourselves. A lot of people are brokers. They're just investors, right? They're not like in the sense of like they're just seeing this as a way to make money. And so they'll do things like they'll make the interest rate look lower up front to get, better marketing to get more people in the door. But then, when you look at, like you said, all the nuances and the details, you're actually paying more overall because of how they change those terms.
Yeah.
Or the
And the
fees.
fees.
A lot of lenders put on a ton of fees. It's crazy.
And
Okay.
those add up so quickly without even realizing it.
Yes. So thank you for humoring me and letting us go down that private lending journey for a while. I always love to talk about that. And it's great to have you on as, the other side of that equation. Now, when you're looking at these value add investing opportunities, these deals today, what are some non-negotiables that you really have realized as you've done some of these deals, you're like, oh my gosh, we got to look for this?
I have the eye of, oh my gosh, this could be amazing and we can make it beautiful and it's going to be all this. So we've bitten off more than we can chew sometimes, a couple of times before, where right now, actually, we're working on another historic property in Mobile, Alabama. Historic properties at a whole different level. And so some of our non-negotiables coming up. Now, it's going to be awesome. It will work out. It will be great. But that's our non-negotiables just in the next few years, just to build income. We probably won't take on another historic property just because of the layer of permit, the layer of requirements that are there. And we didn't know any better to ask those questions. So now that's one of our non-negotiables. Another non-negotiable is really sticking to the numbers. There's been a couple of instances where it's like, I really want this property. And so then we are like, we could pay this much more. And it always bites us at the end because we've done the numbers. We know the numbers. And so that we've really tightened up on that we don't bend after we decide what the numbers are. That's what they are.
I love that. That is both of those great wisdom. Now I'm curious because there's something we talked about a little bit here. Properties that would be classified as rural. I know that the property we worked on was that way. Can you maybe share your experience with rural properties and if that's something you would continue to do?
Yeah, we like the rural properties. Probably we grew up on a farm, so it's that background that we want to connect to it. So we like rural properties. The issue, or one of the big issues with rural properties, is finding lending. It is so hard to find a lender, and especially if you're going to use it as a short-term rental, as an Airbnb
Yeah.
short-term rental. So you have to find the specific, on the refinance side, you have to find the specific lenders that will lend, first of all, rural, and then lend, second of all, as a short-term rental. So that's been
Right.
difficult. The other thing with rural properties that we're learning to ask upfront is whether or not they are on city water, or if they have a well, or if it's septic, or if it's on city sewer, because that makes a difference in your CapEx expenses. And so we want
Yeah.
to make sure that we're asking that up front. We've gotten lucky on a couple of them where we didn't ask that to begin with, and then it ended up being okay. But those are the big issues with rural properties.
Right. That's fabulous. Thank you for sharing that. And I realize our listeners, they're like, well, what makes a property rural? There's actually a website, and it's what we use as lenders. It's put out by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, and they have a rural and underserved areas tool on their website. And kind of
Okay.
like you can check for a flood zone on the FEMA website, you can go to the CFPB website, which is consumerfinance.gov, and you can use their rural tool, put in an address, and see if it's classified as rural, something the US government does. And like Julie's sharing here, a lot of lenders, they won't touch rural at all. And their justification is that it's harder to comp, right? It's harder to come up with like a CMA and all that. It can be. And the other thing is some who will do it, they classify it as like higher risk and they'll only do like one thing that's high risk. So it can either be a short-term rental or it can be rural, but it can't be both often.
Yes. Or they will lend, like the loan to value will be like 65% or something crazy. And I'm like, at that point, I'm bringing half of the money. So it's difficult. That's what we've run into as well. They just won't loan as high on the loan to value.
So have you found any benefits to doing properties that are rural?
Yeah, I mean, the creativity that we can have with it and the space that you can see the layers of potential to grow. So on this property that we're working on together, we've already determined this is our first phase. And then we have phase 2 and phase 3 of what we want to do with the property because it's 2.5 acres. So there's plenty of room where we can add RV pads to it. We can add, we've talked about a pickleball court. I don't know if that one will win or not, but adding those features to it so that it's potentially you're value adding as you go with the property. So that's what we really like about rural. The other thing is that because of short-term rentals and Airbnb, how that is, it makes it so much easier to have it as an Airbnb because you're not dealing with homeowners associations. You're not dealing with neighbors that are complaining about people being there at any time. And so it has been really nice to have it rural. I mean, we're not in the middle of the woods, even though it kind of looks like we are. So it's easy access, but you've got your privacy. So it's really nice.
Right. Yeah. And I think, kind of like what you're saying with the short-term rentals, what's crazy when I moved to Tennessee, when there's a lot of rural property, there are counties where if you're not in like one of the cities, there is no zoning. You can do whatever you want on that property. So when you're talking about short-term rentals, yes, more properties on there, you don't need to be zoned for like high density residency 5. So we have another borrower who in Tennessee outside of one of the state parks, he is redeveloping. There was a main house and then all these cabins that had been fallen into disrepair. He is redoing all of that to be like a huge short-term rental compound,
Oh,
and
that's
it's going to do
awesome. Like a
amazing.
micro resort kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's
And
cool.
we were able to come in and lend, and I'm excited for him and what he's going to do. But yeah, there's no zoning issue with doing that because there's no zoning.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
And the permitting was so much easier. Like, I don't know that we even had to do as much as we did with permitting, but we did it it worked out better for us. But the county was so much easier, like, because structurally we still needed to have permitting, but the zoning we didn't have to then file separately.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. We love that. So while we're talking about all that fun stuff, the paperwork piece, let's talk about like systems and getting some of like the operations piece because your portfolio's grown. I mean, 9 doors is like, that's
Yeah.
notable. That's a lot of operations overhead. And you've got a mix of different, short-term rentals, mid, long. There's a lot to manage there. I'm curious if you have some systems that have become essential to keeping everything running.
Yeah, it's not pulling my hair out is the system. We need better systems is what we do need. And I've talked to you about this before. I mean, our goal is to get a VA soon just because there's so much that goes into everything. And between my sister and I, my sister's a realtor in Alabama, so she's doing that side as well. And so paperwork, like she'll do some of it, I'll do some of it, and it gets crazy sometimes. So yeah, as far as systems, some things that we have put in place, we use Google. Everything that we do is through Google Drive. So we have folders for each property, that all the documents go in there. You've actually helped me a lot with the systems because of the way the lending is set up. The efficiency that you guys have in the portal with the lending has made us be better on our scope of work and organizing all of that. Seriously, I'm like, we need to copy this, and this needs to be how we are going through on the first look at properties and being able to have that as a system so that it's just like, here, you're looking at this section of the house and we're checking so that it matches how it's being on the loan. So I love that. So Google, we've organized like our scope of work through that. We use a lot of, which I know this is basic and elementary, but we use a lot of just text chats. So we have our contractor, my sister, and me in one chat, and everything that goes through that chat. And then the same, so I was just on the phone with our Costa Rican accountant, and so the systems that we've set up with him is we have a separate email address that anything we do document-wise is, what do they call it, secure, and it's sent. So he has access to that account and we have access to that account so that anything that we send back and forth is set up that way. So we've tried to set up those tools so that we can build upon those, but there's so many things that we need to work on, like big time.
As always, refining and reiterating, over time, like that's part of the process. But I love a lot of like the basics you have there are great and can grow. Like we still do instead of like a text chat, we have like a property management phone number that I can see and our property manager VA and my husband, like everybody who needs to can see it so that we can all see when we text the handyman or the cleaner or whatever, like the VA can do it, but I can see, right? That kind of stuff. So it's the same basic idea, just a little different iteration. And one of the things I think you do well, and that honestly, like when you're sharing about our lending portal, that was more of a who, not how thing. Like we found the company that had a good lending system, like, support system. I'm not using the best tech word, but you guys get the idea, right?
That that we put the stuff in.
Yeah. Rather than building it out ourselves, we just found the who, not how of the person who could do it. And you do that well. You do that. So like with your short-term rentals, like I know at least in Costa Rica, you use a property manager, correct?
Yep, that was kind of a trial and error thing last year. Was we went with a company first and they were good, but we just kind of got lost in the mix. And so we ended up going with a couple. So it's just a husband wife team that's our property manager, that they're amazing. We love them. But yeah, it's that who, not how. And then our short-term rental in Alabama, we are now interviewing cleaners. We're interviewing handyman. We found this awesome, he's a landscaper, handyman, plumber kind of guy who's
Yeah.
just going to be great for us. And so that'll be our contact. And then we're still managing the check-ins and those kind of things. My sister does most of that for the short-term rental.
Right. Well, and with the boots on the ground handled with like the cleaner and the
Yeah.
handyman, that helps a lot.
Yeah.
But I love that. And you have an eye toward building out your team. And I love that you shared it didn't go well the first time, but you guys didn't take the job back, which so often people do. And guys, think about nobody has 100% batting average with hiring.
Right.
It's not going to be
Right.
that way. Even if they're a great person, doesn't mean they're a great fit for you and your business in that specific role.
And that's what we've been learning. And that's a topic of conversation lately has been, it doesn't matter that, okay, we're working with people. Okay, we'll give them a chance. And we give way too many chances, by the way, but we give them a chance and go through that. But my sister and I have been talking about, we will continue to work through the people until we get to the 1% that we want to work with. Like, it's worth going through 10 different people to get to the one that is really amazing. And it's a process and it's a learning process, but it's worth it.
Yes, I love that. And it can be tough, but it's worth it. And I will say we have learned to hire slow and to fire fast. If you're a real estate entrepreneur trying to scale while doing everything yourself, there's a better way. The Time and Freedom Starter Pack gives you the exact first steps to reclaim hours each week with real support, including what to hand off, where to start, and simple tools you can put into place right away. Download it for free at adrienngreen.com/starter pack. Now let's get back to the episode. Well, and because we've talked about your property in Costa Rica, I'd love for you to share about investing internationally. We don't have many people who do that. So what prompted you to do it in the first place?
This was a unicorn deal situation, meant to be kind of thing. So I went to Costa Rica for a vacation. And fun fact, it is the first stamp in my passport. Like, I've been to Canada, I've been to Mexico, but as far as like actually international, isn't that crazy? So my college girlfriends and I get together. We try to get together once a year, but it ends up being like every other year or whenever. So one of my girlfriends is a professor at a university and she was on sabbatical in Costa Rica. She took her kids out of school. They traveled Costa Rica for a year. It was awesome.
How
And I
fun.
said, that sounds like
Yeah.
a fabulous excuse for us to have a meetup together. So we met her in Costa Rica and we just randomly picked a place. Like, she hadn't been there, we hadn't been there. And we did some research and chose a place to stay in Playa Flamingo. And I said, you know what, I'm going to reach out. Like, let's write off part of this trip and go down there and see. And so I reached out to the property manager, who was also a real estate agent, and said, hey, can we look at some short-term rentals, possible short-term rental in that area? And he said, yeah, that's fine. Well, we were down there around Christmas. So we had breakfast with him, and one of my girlfriends went with me and for the meeting. So we had breakfast and he said, well, he goes, you know, the property you're staying in is for sale, right? And I said, no, I did not know that. And he said, I didn't send it to you because it was out of your buy box. And so my buy box, I had said 500,000 and below. And so I said, how far out are we talking? And so we had this whole conversation and he goes, well, and I said, yeah, that's a little bit far out. So it was listed at like 899 or something like that, like 890.
Wow.
And I was like, and so we continued the conversation and he said, well, have you ever heard of seller financing? And I said, yeah, we have 2 other properties that are seller financed. And he said, well, they're willing to seller finance at 50% at 6%, interest at 50% of the loan. And so I was like, that makes it a little more interesting. Yeah.
And let's pause here. I'm curious because even for where U.S. investment property interest rates were at that time, I know that was good. And what a lot of listeners may not know is mortgages can be more difficult to get and more expensive in other countries. So
Very
how would that
difficult.
compare to
Yeah,
like
they
what
do
you would have
not
seen in
loan.
Costa Rica?
It's very difficult to get a loan. It's getting better. I've contacted, there's 2 loan companies in Costa Rica now that will lend to US citizens, but usually still they're like at 50% or 65%, and the interest rates at that time were like in the 8s and 9s. So, and this
So
was
this was
last year.
awesome.
Yes, super excited. And the other piece of that is the seller was a US citizen. So he is from Arizona. And so that helped a little bit, but we couldn't just say, "Hey, we want to buy your Costa Rica condo from you, but it's in Costa Rica." Like of course, there's legal stuff in the midst of that, which I didn't know this at the time. I mean, I knew that there was legal stuff. I didn't know how much of that. So anyway, so we looked at all the other short-term rental possibilities in that area, and they were great, but I was like, that doesn't compare to ours because this condo is right on the beach. Like I could well, I don't know if I could throw a rock. My kids could throw a rock and hit the water. And so it's in Costa Rica, 96%, I think, of the coastline is not allowed to be built upon. Like you can't go that far. So we're grandfathered in like that 4%. So we're right on the beach. So anyway, so we had this whole conversation, and so I was like, let me run these numbers. And so went through it all. This was Christmas Eve day that we did this, looking at this. So I flew home on Christmas Day so I could be back. And so in the airport, I'm like, "Hey, do you think you would finance a little bit more than 50%?" And he's like, "I don't know, maybe, like put in the offer." And so back up 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I had already met with a private money lender to flip houses in Alabama. And so she had already earmarked 250,000 for us to flip houses in Alabama. And so I texted her and said, "Hey, do you maybe want to like redirect your investment and make it a little bit more long term?" And so had the conversation with her, had this meetup. Long story short, we put an offer in on December 28th. They
Wow.
came back with a counter offer and accepted it, and we closed January 30th. Like it was a 30-day closing, and that included
That's
getting
amazing.
the LLC set up in Costa Rica. Like we got a
Wow.
full LLC with the lawyer and everything set up in Costa Rica. So that is a unicorn deal because it does not normally happen that way. And proof that it doesn't happen that way, I still don't have a bank account in Costa Rica. Still. I've gone 3 times. I've gone 3 times to try to set up a bank account in Costa Rica, and it has not happened.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot to unpack there, but I will kind of give the little tangential thing here of it's funny because bureaucracy like drives me crazy, right? And like time wasted because I'm super efficient. And going to other countries has humbled me in that sense of like, I will never complain about bureaucracy and time wasted in the US again because it is so much worse in other countries.
oh my gosh. Like I said, the fact that we closed in 30 days is like a miracle because it is. I mean, I've sent in paperwork, I've sent in documents, I've had a lawyer meet me at the bank to have it set up, and it's still not set up. So yeah,
I know it's frustrating.
but yes.
Well, and I want to like give a kudos and a shout out to you because so many people, they get stuck in analysis paralysis, right? Or they are like, oh, well, I can't figure out the rest of the financing, or it was more expensive than I thought. And they just walk away. And all of that, to be honest, like we know all of that is excuses because they're just afraid of either success or failure. They're afraid of
Mhm.
doing it and either like succeeding and having to figure out what that looks like, right? Because that's going to make them be a new person and have new problems, or failing. Because I mean, let's be real, all Americans from a young age are taught failing is bad. And we have a fear of that like built in, hardwired in our
I
brains.
have been overcoming that training. Yeah. Because it is. I mean, and that was part of it, but I had gotten to the point in my real estate investing. And I mean, like I said, this was last year, and we've done, I think, 3 or 4 properties since then. But the numbers worked. And that's what I have to keep going back to. The numbers worked. And even though they didn't, like, there's no way you can pencil it out perfectly. Like, you just can't with a rental, with a short-term rental. But we penciled it out as well as we could, and the numbers worked. But yes, I had to push through, like, how do we do this internationally? How do I send, like, you need my passport and this? Wait, I have to sign it in person? I'm in the US. How am I supposed to sign this in person? And so there was a lot of learning through that,
Mhm.
but it was so worth it. So worth it.
So I'm curious. There's a lot we can unpack there. A lot we can unpack. Would you invest in Costa Rica again? Yes or no? Like, would you
Yes.
buy a second property? Okay.
Yes.
Would you invest in another country?
Possibly. So one of my goals on my bucket list, and it's funny that it's on my bucket list because I've never even been there yet, but I really want to purchase in Spain and Italy. So I've been doing some research and looking into that and what the laws are. I recently met someone who is buying castles in Spain. They're full functioning hotels. So I want to see how that process works and knowing the legal team and how that works. But yeah, I would totally invest in another country because all it is asking questions. Like you just have to ask the right questions to
Well, I
get
have a
through the
question for
process.
you. One of the things I have seen in a lot of, so we go to a lot of places that are hot and humid, like Costa Rica, right? And I specifically remember being in Costa Rica, I don't know, a few years ago, right before we started all this travel stuff. And I was in a Marriott. The workers in the Marriott were like nonstop fixing up this place. Like some place always smelled like fresh paint 'cause they were always having to repaint it or things like this. The hot, humid weather is intense on properties. What has that looked like on your property in Costa Rica?
Is a really good question. And luckily, we knew some of the questions to ask because Alabama is hot and humid as well. And that's where I went to high school in Alabama. My sister lives there. Like, so we know some of the things to ask. A big thing, another question to ask was natural disasters. Like, I kept asking, like, are we going to get hit by hurricanes because we're right on the water? And they said, no, that's not what we worry about for insurance purposes. It's earthquakes.
And you're like, oh,
And I
okay.
was
So
like,
are we going to get
what?
that?
I am like, okay. But yeah, they said that it's not a big deal, but it threw me for a loop. But as far as the weathering and that kind of thing on the property, that's part of what our property manager manages and keeps up with. So we have mini splits in each room. So they can, run their own air conditioning and heating. So that's part of the monthly check is making sure the drains are working correctly on
Yes.
those, making sure they're getting cleaned correctly. I think it's quarterly. He takes care of it, so I don't even pay attention to it anymore, but making sure that those are on a regular cleaning basis and then paint. Like you said, like painting on that. And we have a wood patio kind of thing that the patio itself is not all wood, but the framing of it, so it's stained, and so we have like cans of stain that every now and then you just go back through and paint through it
Yeah.
to keep up with that because the ocean water will just eat that away. But
Well,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, you put the ocean water on top of everything and it's
Yeah,
intense.
and the rust, like all the nails that have been used like on the patio place or get rusted, so we have to go back and repaint those. But just making sure the maintenance is there. And our condominium complex, there's only I think 14 in the complex. And so they're really good about like we have our monthly report and what they're doing and they keep up the area pretty well.
Yeah. That is one thing I have liked. I'm not a huge fan of HOAs in general, right? As a
Huh?
homeowner, freedom lover,
Right,
etc.
right.
And
Mhm.
yet, for investment properties, the maintenance of the common areas, like if what your intended use is well within what the organization allows, the fact that they take care of those common areas and you can have some amenities like pools or whatever that your guests can use, it makes it a lot easier for sure.
It does, especially if you're in a condo, like a specific, the condo complex. The other thing has been with the hot and humid is pest control. Pest control is essential and making sure that that's kept up with just because, like water bugs and different things get in
Mhm.
and it's like, okay, we got to make sure. And in Costa Rica, even more so, pest control is important. So we haven't had a huge issue, but just making sure that it's happening monthly.
Right. And now, do you have, I know that with the humid weather, in some places we've been, mold and mildew in the houses can be an issue. And with a short-term rental, I think about how sometimes you've got downtime, like the off season. Do you guys like just have the mini splits run at some like minimum level when the house is unoccupied, or what do you do for that?
Yeah, those are usually turned off with our property manager. And honestly, we haven't had a ton of downtime, which is exciting
Yeah, that's
for the
great.
short term rental. still, but when it does, he still goes and checks on it and making sure and then runs it for a few hours. We don't keep it running the whole time though.
Because that could get expensive.
Yeah, it gets really expensive. But and making sure like the seals on the doors are done correctly and, that kind of thing. And again, I feel like it helps with the condominium because you're sharing walls with others. So we haven't had an issue so far. The biggest issue we had was one of the mini split lines, like the condensation gets on the air conditioning line. So it's run like through our loft area to one of the bedrooms. And so that condensation messed up like the ceiling part of it. And so we've had to like keep up with that because it's going to keep happening.
Right. Yeah, it was funny. Mini splits, I feel like in the US, sometimes people can have a stigma or whatever because they're not as common, but I love mini splits. They're what we see everywhere else in our travels. But it was funny because we went to this one restaurant a few days ago. We're here in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Talk about hot and humid. Oh my goodness. And this mini split had a bucket on the floor underneath it because it had this area where it was just dripping. So, okay.
You're like,
Okay.
oh, well, what else are you going to do? Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Because it does get bad. And then the other thing we've talked about doing, we haven't yet, is to get a dehumidifier to put in there just to draw some of that out. But honestly, because we're on the ocean, it doesn't get stuffy. Like, you know how humid, whether you're kind of like,
Yeah.
"Ugh," but there's enough
You've got the
breeze most of the
breezes.
time
Yeah.
that it's nice.
Awesome. Yeah, that
So,
sounds
yeah.
really nice.
But I would definitely buy in Costa Rica again. We're actually looking. There's 2 boutique hotels in that area that we've looked at, and there's a couple of people other investors who are interested in boutique hotels that I'm going to be sharing that information with. And the numbers don't work yet, but we're going to mess with them to see if we can
You're
get
working
the
on
numbers
it.
to work. Yeah.
I love it. Awesome. Well, Julie, this has been great. It's always fun. We're friends, guys, for our listeners.
Yeah.
It was good to get to like talk and share and learn and share it with everyone else. Now, Julie, if people would like to continue the conversation, ask a question or get to know you, what is the best way for them to reach out?
So the best way would be, well, I'm on Instagram and Facebook and all of that. My website is the name of my company, www.heartrockenterprises. I know it's long, .com. So it's Heart, HEARTROCK, Enterprises. And so the Heart Rock, that's a really cute story. I know we're out of time, but my kids always find me heart-shaped rocks. That's why, that's
Aw.
where they named the company. My kids did. So,
That's
yeah, that's the best
awesome.
place. And then
Okay.
message me on Instagram. It's Julie_HeartRockJourney. And then Facebook is Julie Heart Rock Journey. So it's
Awesome.
all the
Perfect.
same.
And we'll have all of that, guys, below so you can grab it later. But I love that also about naming the company because I feel like I always want a business name that's like personal, but also understandable. Then you put something out there and you're like, oh, there's like 5,000 other ones. But I bet
I know.
Heart Rock was something there wasn't a whole lot of competition for.
Right. There wasn't a ton. out there. So yeah, it isn't necessarily real estate related, but I wanted it to be like the Heart Rock journey. Like it is. It's your heart's journey that you're on kind of thing. And I know it
Yeah.
kind of gets a little woo woo, but I liked it and my kids came up with the name. It was good.
I love it. And it's unique.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So, guys, you can reach out to Julie. And now, Julie, for our listeners, who are you looking to connect with right now? What do you need to further your real estate journey?
Good question. So I'm always looking for partners when we're looking specifically capital partners with that because I'm doing the work kind of thing. I'm pivoting into multifamily. So we've done the short-term rentals, we've done the long-term rentals. We have, I forgot to mention, we have a midterm rental as well, but we're really moving into that multifamily, 2 different categories of multifamily, looking at the mid-size. In Alabama, that means between 20 to 60 units in that because I have some investors who are interested in that and partnering on those. And then I'm also working on a multifamily syndication in Dallas with the Elevate team. And so I'm always looking for investors, always looking for capital partners, and I'm always looking for people to just connect with. I love connecting and continuing to learn and build other people up as they're going through this as well.
Yeah, Julie is a great connector. I can vouch for that myself. Well, thank you, Julie, for coming and sharing your experience with us. Guys, I have been asking Julie to come on since I met her. And so I'm really excited that it all came together and it all comes together when it's supposed to. So this is when it was supposed to happen.
Yes.
And for our listeners, thank you and join me again next week for another episode of The Freedom Blueprint.